So today on Bitcoin, everybody's thinking that we're forming a flag, right? Or bull flag, excuse me. Let's draw out the bull flag for you, okay? And it has been a few days, like 2 days, since I actually made a good trading view idea. So here we are. I tried to record yesterday, but I turned off my computer before the upload was finished. That's my fault. So let's actually talk about some things we're noticing here. Interestingly enough, we are getting a good chunk of volatility overhead. And it's actually a disconnected chunk of volatility overhead. And that really plays into the concept of, well, overhead resistance, right? Since if we have this radiating piece of mass working its way upward, then it's liable that its re-expansion is going to be very difficult until we have a new period of net expansion. Think about it like this. You see this red plume radiating up through here? Right. Those are longer term periods compressing down onto price, right? And it's very hard to actually get them to re-expand. Okay. So when we actually see this kind of scenario where we get this new little pop of overhead red like this, right? That's really saying that something had enough force to actually push up above those distributions to cause them to re-expand. In other words, there is significant force in the market right now. So with that in mind, we can actually look at a shorter time frame because Wave PM does tend to compress preemptively on shorter time frames. We're actually going to be able to take a look at this bad boy right here. Right, our longest overexpanded period is roughly 240. So if we load up the 240 band, you'll notice that the 240 band is most likely defining trend rather significantly. And it has been at least 24 hours since I looked at this information. So, oh, well, would you look at that? Yeah, that's pretty well defined. Right, so 240 is our longest overexpanded period. So it makes sense that 240 band is defining our pivot for trend. Guys, I can't make up how well defined these pivots are, right? And I am not subjectively putting this band on this chart, right? This indicator over here, I'm going to show you how you use it. This red plume, we go up, we find out what the longest red plume is, and you can see the numbers on the right. It scales logarithmically. If we look right here on this period, right, it's actually roughly about 225, and there is a little bit of red up here on 240, or 245, 250, excuse me. So I've rounded off to 240, right? And I've actually loaded up a higher resolution version of 3D Wave PM, which would take far too long to actually do on this trading view idea, but it is roughly around 240, right? So 240 is our defining pivot of trend. If we break inside this band, price will, I have this meme going on where I say 100%, and it's an ironic clickbait, but it apparently it's a little off-putting despite getting like quadruple the views. But well, we're going to say 95% because that actually lines up with my back tests. Okay, so if we are under this band, there's about a 95% chance we'll touch down on this mean. Out of the last 20 times that this signal has triggered, the only time it has failed was right here, where our longest period was around 275, and we actually did not dip down to the 275 mean completely. And I actually have a pretty good explanation for that. Okay, so lateral trading will occur as defined by the compressing longest overexpanded period's 1.25 standard deviation, as long as that period has a mass rating above the 0.7 value. Okay. And that's a lot of information, but here's what I mean. So let's take a look here, right? Our longest overexpanded period here was 275, right? And it's indicated by this beautiful little red nick right there on the 275 period, right? As soon as that value turns green, price is no longer required to trade inside the 1.25 standard deviation of the 275 period. So when this volatility overhead evaporates by turning green, that means price can reasonably trend outside. Okay, so right here at February 18th at 2 a.m., okay, that's where the volatility overhead first evaporated. And if we actually take a look at February 18th at 2 a.m., oops, right there, Okay, you'll notice that as soon as this volatility overhead evaporates, well, right there, that's where trend begins, right? We get the breakout of the 1.25 standard deviation of that area because we now have sufficiently compressed the amount of mass to allow for the beginning of trend, right? If you're pushing a snowball and it gets too large, right, you got to get a snowball somewhere. This is the top of a hill up here, okay? And as long as you're pushing the snowball, well, it's going to add mass, right? You add mass, you add mass, you add mass. Right? As you roll the snowball, more snow gets compacted onto the snowball. So if it gets too big, what do you have to do? You either need to get more people to push it with you, which is exactly what happened on the daily chart for Bitcoin's bull run, right? Where we just got more and more people to push. Or your other alternative is leave it alone, right? Eventually the sun's going to come out and it's going to melt the snowball, right? That's what a bull flag is, guys. It's the snowball melting. Right, so we pushed this all the way up here. We generated a lot of mass, so we have to leave it alone. And then it just goes sideways. It doesn't do much. It compresses. It sheds its mass, right? Because the sun comes out and it melts the snowball. And if the snowball's melted, well, it now has less mass and it's easier to pushing it, right? And we actually have this as a definable metric or a defined metric, right? By looking at wave PM and 3D wave PM, we can actually see that evaporation, that melting take place. And interestingly enough, guys, look at this. Do you see this new plume of mass that generated? It went up to the point where the previous volatility overhead occurred, right? So we had this radiating period working its way up here, just like so, right? All this orange here is excessive mass on higher periods. So when this new expansion began, guess where it stopped? You guessed it, right where that mass from the previous run still was. So for these upper periods, that means these periods still have too much mass, and it's very difficult to get them on the move again. Wow, that is really clean. Okay, so now we're getting that same evaporation occurring. We'll get lateral trading as defined by the 240 band on the 1 hour chart until this value of the 240 turns green. It goes below the 0.7 value. And what's even more important to note, well, is we haven't even crossed those pivots yet. Right? We are not technically in a state of compression. We are still technically in a state of trend. Okay? And if we are technically in a state of trend, well, then we can expect price to continue trending. Right? So we have really good profit ratio trades here. We can just buy anything on the upside of this and then sell if we do happen to go inside that band there. And if we go inside that band, well, then we're getting consolidation, like so, down to the 240 mean. Okay? And really, it's a clean chart. It's not a good idea to show this quite yet because, well, again, this is still upward expansion. So, really, we can settle that if this band is re-entered. We can get some short entries, right? We do a smaller short entry as soon as the band is entered, and then a larger short entry when we get the CCI roll down. So, until then, you can have some really nice hedged longs. You just layer up some longs with your profit ratio is insane, right? Because you're betting on trend continuation. You're going to have a downside of, say, maybe 2%. Beautiful. And your upside, well, how high do you think trend is going to go, right? And I can actually give you a good answer on how high trend is liable to go. One important thing to note is that from the previous crash pattern, we had this compressing range. It got tighter and tighter and tighter to the downside. So yes, I am inclined to believe that if this breaks into the 240 band on the 1 hour chart, we will get full reversion back down to the weekly 200 again. However, at least from this set of bullish motion here, okay, it would make sense. We can at least trend up to, say, this mean here, right? We have lateral trading as defined by this band, which means we can trend here. And that's a little unrealistic at the moment since I am just expecting the further compression of price. So really, I'm not taking any shorts until this band breaks on the 1 hour chart. But when it does, well, there's going to be some really good short entries and like longer term short entries that should last you more than a few weeks, right? Because as soon as we enter this band, you can very reliably expect lateral trading as defined by the band. And then, well, since we are having a first leg down, further retracement would be a possibility, okay? It has been a pleasure.